There have been many changes over the last 10 years with e-learning. I think probably one of the biggest changes is the transition from Flash to the rapid authoring. So that started with people using PowerPoint and converting that to Flash-based courses. And then probably the big benefit there is that it democratized e-learning. So when you had Flash-based e-learning, it was expensive. A lot of organizations didn't have access to those resources. And then when the PowerPoint-based e-learning, while it wasn't necessarily maybe as dynamic as the Flash-based, what it did is it opened the industry up to all sorts of organizations. I think Mosaico is really a good example of that transition, that rapid authoring environment that happened over the last 10 years really allowed them to kind of grow in the industry and grow as the industry grew. The reality is that in a given work year, it's about 2,000 hours of work. Most people, they're going to learn on the job, so e-learning only plays a small role in there. But e-learning does bring a lot of value. It allows organizations to reduce the cost of training, where they used to send people out to do training. They don't need to do that any longer, so it's a lot more beneficial for the organizations. And it creates a lot of opportunities for people to grow in the industry, and a lot of opportunities for organizations to expand their training offerings to people that work within their organization locally or even at remote locations or that are geographically dispersed. When it comes to e-learning, there are obviously a lot of university programs and certificate programs you could take. A lot of people go and learn instructional design. I think those things are good. I don't think when you build e-learning courses that they're necessarily critical. I know a lot of experts in our industry kind of cringe when I say that, but I think when you are hired to build e-learning courses, obviously you need to understand how people learn. You need to understand a lot of different things about learning, about building courses, but you don't necessarily need a college degree to do that. When I hire people, what I'm interested in seeing is their portfolio, so I can get a sense of the types of work that they've worked on, and the portfolio really demonstrates their skills, because it doesn't matter if you've got a college degree, if you can't build a good e-learning course, then you just can't build a good e-learning course. You're not going to be a hireable person. So I think it's important to have demonstrated skills, and you're going to have that with a portfolio and working on the right types of projects to gain that experience. In terms of e-learning, there's just a lot of different things. E-learning, when I started, you had to instructional designer, and then you had a whole host of other people doing things. But today with the rapid authoring tools, generally the e-learning developers, the instructional designer, the programmer, the graphic designer, the videographer. So you really have to have a pretty broad understanding of all these different mediums and how to use them in your courses. I think having a basic understanding of those things, that's going to help you be successful. I think the key thing, you want to understand how people learn, so getting a background in instructional design of those things, whether it's formal or not, that's important. But the main thing is that you have to have experience and then a way to demonstrate that. I think putting together a really diverse portfolio of examples is a great way to demonstrate your skills and the things that you're able to do. E-learning, if you think about it, and the evolution of e-learning, essentially it started as classroom training, and people were figuring out how to get my classroom training and bring it online. And so generally what happened is the model for that was to kind of repeat the way you taught in the classroom. So a lot of the early e-learning, and really a lot of the e-learning that still exists today, is content that people use for classroom, and then they just convert it with one of these tools, and they put it online, put a quiz on there. That's probably adequate for a lot of compliance training and things like that, but the real goal with any type of training or learning is to change performance, to change behaviors. And I think that's probably the biggest gap that e-learning developers or the industry have today, is that we build a lot of content and we get that out there, but we don't really focus a lot on the learning experience. And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity for people to learn how to build learning experiences and provide better e-learning. So I think going forward, what I think is neat is these tools, these rapid authoring tools like Articulate Storyline. those things have opened up the industry, and people used to have a lot of content and discussion around the tools and technologies, but now because everybody can build e-learning, they don't necessarily always build the best e-learning, but because they can build e-learning, a lot more conversation revolves around how to build better learning experiences. So even though there's some challenges in our industry, I think that's still a really good thing about where things are going. Yeah, this is my first time in Italy. I'm really excited to meet many of the e-learning developers out here. I don't know if I could speak specifically to Italy as a market and the opportunities here and all of that, but I think I can speak to what I see as differences. I'm mostly in the United States doing work there and doing workshops. For a long time it seemed like the U.S. was a little bit more ahead of other countries in terms of their online training and those things, which kind of makes sense because a lot of the technology countries or companies are based out of there. But I think with the authoring tools getting easier to use, that really opened the industry up to other countries. And with the internet, everything kind of compresses. So the countries that were maybe a few years behind, 4 or 5 years ago, are really catching up quickly. So I think a lot of opportunities. I think one of the key differences I see, and probably a place where the U.S. is a little bit different, we have a lot of local training organizations and unions that way, and I think in Europe in general you don't see quite as much of that. So I think the access to learning more about e-learning is a little bit more limited. But I think from what I've seen as the market emerges and everything's getting a lot better. One thing I do notice quite a bit when we go to leave the United States and come to the workshops, especially in Europe, is the age of the e-learning developers. In the U.S., it seems like a lot of them are people who kind of grew into training. They were subject matter experts, became trainers, and then ended up transitioning to e-learning. And we come to the European events, and I'm sure Italy will be similar to that, is we see, one is a pretty broad range of diversity in terms of gender and all of that. And then the other thing is we see a lot more young people in e-learning, which I think then, when you think about the emerging market, having younger people in that market probably will drive a lot more energy and creativity than people who are maybe closer to the end of their careers. Yeah, e-learning, continues to evolve. I think, while the industry's been around for, 30 or so years, it's really taken off maybe the last 10 years. So it continues to evolve. Like I was saying, we transitioned from classroom content, putting it online, and now looking at learning experiences. And that's going to converge with the mobile technology. So we already see that now. More and more people are consuming media on the mobile devices, and so that'll impact training and e-learning development. Another one that's emerging, virtual reality, augmented reality, those things, you already start to see a little bit of that in e-learning. And I think probably the thing from an e-learning developer's perspective, because building virtual reality to do that right is going to be very expensive. So that'll be the same issue organizations had with Flash. They just wanted the resources to do that. What's not going to be expensive is AI. So I think what we'll see is, as the data and this artificial intelligence increases, it's probably going to have a tremendous impact on the e-learning industry, because you'll have these AI systems that'll actually be able to create a lot of the training content that we create today. So there'll probably be some sort of shift in how organizations build training, especially the compliance type training. That always seems scary for e-learning developers because that kind of implies that they may be out of work. But I'll always go back to 30 years ago when I was starting. I thought one day somebody's going to realize how easy PowerPoint is and I'll be out of work. 30 years later, people are still using PowerPoint and still using it the same way. So it's things haven't really changed as fast as we generally think about those things. And I think even with these technologies emerging and impacting our industry, the reality is change happens slowly as well. So I think it's a good time to be in this industry. It's still growing, exciting time. And a lot of what we see with technology, we also see with learning, and those things are kind of converging. So it's a really neat time to be in the industry.